All right, so today we're diving into a really personal and honestly pretty profound text. It's a raw confession about faith, but also about a crushing sense of failure and what happens when you find a totally radical path to redemption. We're going to explore one soul's incredible journey with divine mercy.
So the first thing you'll notice is that this text doesn't really ease you in. Nope, it just starts with this absolute explosion of gratitude. And this isn't just, a polite thank you. It's this powerful, overwhelming declaration that basically frames her entire story. Everything, right from the get-go, is seen through this lens of immense, unearned mercy. And that, right there, sets the stage for everything that's about to follow.
Now, what's interesting here is that the first part of her story isn't about hardship or struggle, the way you might expect. Instead, she kicks things off by basically listing out what she sees as a life just completely flooded with divine gifts and protection. And this is from the very, very beginning.
So take a look at how she maps out her life here. It's really fascinating. It's not about her own accomplishments, right? It's about what she sees as God's direct interventions. Think about it. Being set on a religious path at just 5 years old, then being, in her words, preserved from sin for 2 whole decades, and then having this major spiritual awakening at 25. I mean, for her, a divine hand is guiding every single step of the way.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. You'd think a life so full of blessings would lead to a sense of peace, right? Well, for her, it does the exact opposite. It creates this incredibly profound and painful conflict, a clash between all the goodness she's received and her own deep-seated feeling of unworthiness.
And this slide just illustrates that core conflict perfectly. On one side of the ledger, you've got this absolute ocean of divine gifts. We're talking thoughts of peace, loving reconciliation. But then look at the other side. That's her response, and it's brutal. Blindness, shameless ingratitude, even returned evil for good. It's like the more grace she feels she receives, the more her own failings just seem to pop out in stark, painful relief.
And right here, she gives us this really powerful visual to explain how she's feeling. The goodness she's been shown. Imagine it as a brilliant, shining light. Well, that light only makes what she calls the blackness of my ungrateful life look even darker in comparison. This goes way beyond simple guilt, It's a deep, profound sense of spiritual dissonance.
So, what do you do when you're faced with what feels like an impossible spiritual debt? Well, she doesn't just give up and despair. No, she finds a whole new way forward. And it's a truly radical solution for trying to balance the scales when she knows her own efforts just aren't going to cut it.
And here she just lays the problem out so clearly. She gets that God doesn't need anything from her, right? But she still feels this huge, profound obligation to offer something worthy. The problem is, she comes to the conclusion that she is, in her own words, altogether incapable of producing anything valuable enough on her own to make up for all her failings.
So what's her solution? It is absolutely extraordinary. Her logic is, if I can't offer my own imperfect life as payment, then I'll offer something that is perfect. And what's that? The entire life and suffering of Jesus Christ. And you can see it right here. She goes through every single stage, infancy, childhood, youth, manhood, and offers it all up as a kind of spiritual payment. I mean, this is a really profound theological idea. We're moving way beyond simple acts of personal penance and into this concept of leveraging a perfect offering to cover an imperfect debt.
And this act, this offering, it's not just some kind of spiritual transaction. It's a total transformation for her. After she has this realization, her spiritual life just deepens dramatically. She starts to receive what she describes as these new, incredibly profound, and deeply personal gifts of understanding.
Now, she points to 2 experiences that she values above absolutely everything else. First, having the glorious marks of thy saving wounds imprinted on her heart. And second, having her heart truly and deeply pierced with the wound of thy love. And what's really crucial to get here is that for her, these aren't just pretty poetic metaphors. No way. These are profound, almost tangible, mystical gifts. So much so that she says they alone could provide 1,000 years' worth of thanksgiving.
I mean, what a powerful image, right? She calls God's heart the sacred ark of thy divinity. Think of it like a safe, holy place that's been opened up just for her. So this isn't about worshiping from a distance anymore. This is about a deep, mutual friendship, an intimate, mystical connection that becomes the source of literally all her happiness.
So after this whole incredible journey, from grace to guilt and then to redemption, you have to ask the question, why write all this down? What's the point? Well, in the final part of her confession, she makes her motivation crystal clear. And trust me, it's not for her own glory.
And here it is, the ultimate reason. This incredibly personal document, it was always meant for a public audience. She wrote it specifically so that future generations, people like us, reading it centuries later, could get a glimpse of the sweetness and clemency of the divine. Her private confession was always meant to be a public testament. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This text comes from a completely different world, a time of deep, sustained spiritual introspection. So in our own age, an age of constant distraction, what can we take away from a practice like this? This radical practice of confronting our own imperfections and reaching for a kind of gratitude so profound that it literally shapes a person's entire life.